Welcome to the Cycle Coach Show.
Empowering conversations on menstrual cycle coaching.
We're your hosts, Claire Baker
and Lauren Olivia Hughes.
Hello and welcome back to the Cycle Coach Show. You've got Claire here and I am thrilled to introduce today's episode. Now, this is a special one because Lauren and I are both interviewing today's guest. To be honest, we were just so excited to have her on that we just jumped at the opportunity to share in this conversation together. We are welcoming Adele Wimsett to the Cycle Coach Show. And Adele is a women's health practitioner, like many of you listening, and her passion is to empower women and people with periods to harmonize their hormones. Her support covers menarche to menopause and bridges the science with the spirituality, really offering this holistic approach to women's health. She works one-on-one with people and also online and in her in-person hormone clinics in the UK. But Adele's special interest, and this is why we invited her on, is supporting girls and women with how their hormones affect their ADHD traits, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed. Now, neurodivergence is getting a lot of airtime right now. It's necessary airtime, and it's really important, I believe, that we're having more conversations like this. I personally just completed a training on how to work with neurodivergent clients with a coaching lens. And it was fabulous. I learned so much and I'm glad I took the training. But what was interesting is that there wasn't a lot of discussion about how ADHD can manifest differently in male bodies compared to female bodies. And as I have begun my own personal journey into exploring my ADHD traits, this is something that I'm recognizing more and more. And this is an area that is so dear to my heart, as it is to Lauren's as well, as we both explore these ADHD traits, working with practitioners and beginning the diagnostic process. It was really, it was a really personal conversation that we had. We really wanted to focus, and you'll hear us speak a lot to how practitioners who are working with neurodivergent clients and coaching and partnering with neurodivergent female clients, what we really need to be considering. How can we be sensitive to the different experience of the neurodivergent being? And what do we need to be mindful of, sensitive of? How can we be more creative? What do we really need to consider? These are things that I think are really, really important. So you're going to take so much out of our conversation from the practical strategies that we discuss. You're also going to hear how you can support yourself if you are a neurodivergent coach yourself. If you are a human being who also has neurodivergent traits, then you're going to hear us speak to that too, which is super important as well. And because the three of us are all, Adele has an ADHD diagnosis and has been journeying with this for some time, because the three of us are all well and truly in this world personally, you're going to hear us share some personal stories too. And I want to mention this because some of the things that come up are sensitive. We speak to the co-occurrence of neurodivergent beings having other medical issues or mental health issues, and also the co-occurrence of things like eating disorders. And so I want to share that as a content warning going into this episode, that we do share some what some might call some heavy stuff, but really important as well. So please be mindful of that going into this episode. You're also going to hear us talk a lot about tea and laugh and giggle and probably talk over each other and just have a really lovely ADHD diva time together. So do enjoy. And while I'm here, thank you for all of your support for the show so far. We are nearing the end of this first season, a couple more episodes to go. But I've just been so grateful to receive your feedback, to see the 5-star reviews coming in, and all of the shares are just so appreciated. So please do share this if you get something out of this show and you feel like there might be people in your life who would also take value from this really important conversation. Enjoy. Welcome to the Cycle Coach Show. We have myself today, Claire, and my co-host, Lauren, interviewing somebody together for the very first time, which we're pretty excited about. And we have Adele Wimsett with us today, which I'm really thrilled to introduce you all to Adele. Adele is a women's health practitioner, and Adele covers work with women from menarche to menopause. She bridges science and research with the woo and the spirituality, and she has a special interest in supporting girls and women with how their hormones affect their diagnosed or undiagnosed ADHD traits. And this is the topic of today's chat is how can we, as practitioners who are working with women or folks with menstrual cycles, as menstrual cycle coaches, how do we support our clients who have ADHD traits, our neurodivergent people? So Adele, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So pleased that you're here. Now, we start our conversations here on the podcast with a cycle check-in. I'm curious whereabouts you are in your cycle today, if applicable, and how you're feeling.
Wow, I'm day 25, which is not ideal for an ADHD woman to be doing a podcast. So if I get completely distracted, end up umming and ahhing and going, what was I just saying? Please just help guide me back. But I'm feeling pretty good.
I'm day 24, so I'm right behind you. And my cycles are like 26 days, so I'm pretty close to the end. I have been off the planet for the last few days, like totally off the planet. And oh God, just the last 24 hours of my life have been hysterical. How I have managed to get anything done is I've gotten things done, but I've just been late to things. I've just totally lost my sense of direction. I've gotten up to start one project and ended up starting like a million others. And yet I'm still here, and we're still here and we're all on time and we're having this conversation. So celebrating that. Lauren, whereabouts are you in your cycle?
I'm cycle day 4. So together, the energy is going to be interesting. I feel like yesterday I had like such foggy brain. Claire and I had a chat and I had a hard time with stringing sentences together. So today might be a continuation of that. But we will do our best. And I'm feeling good. I'm excited for this conversation because, ADHD is near and dear to both of our hearts, all three of our hearts, really. So if we want to get started, I would love to hear, Adele, a bit more about your personal journey in getting into the menstrual cycle awareness world and then how the ADHD piece kind of came into the work that you now do.
So in my previous life, I was a senior manager in youth offending services where I specialised in female offending. But my interest was health and well-being. So I loved what I did for my work and understood special educational needs and ADHD within the context of naughty little boys, on which it very much was 10 years ago. And I used to joke, that's my ADHD, but never really took it seriously. And then I was doing all the things that I thought were good for my health. I was doing aggressive fasting, fasted exercise, raw vegan diets, following all the sort of well-meaning advice that was touted, and my period vanished, which at the time felt like one less problem in my life. But I knew that wasn't good. So I began researching, and my not so inner feminist was furious at all the advice that was touted to women because of this gender bias that exists in lifestyle and medical research. And so we adopt these models of health and wellness that we think are supporting us that are actually damaging us with a female physiology. So I took it upon myself that I would make it my mission to retrain. And I was very fortunate that I retrained to Nicole Jardim, who wrote Fix Your Period, who just changed everything for me. And I trained with Miranda Gray with the womb healing and the cyclical side. I just sat there crying like, my whole life now makes sense. Why has nobody told me this? So then began to set up working with the Women's Hormone Clinic. And then a few years ago, I started to note some traits in my daughters. I've got 2 little girls, started researching it and thought, I really need to look at perhaps a diagnosis, which I'd always thought I don't need a diagnosis. I've been fine. I've got this far. What do I need a diagnosis for? Anyway, decided to get one. And it changed everything. It was the most validating experience of my life, which I hadn't expected it to be. And obviously, because of my work, went to, well, what role are the hormones playing? Like, hormones affect everything. How is this affecting my traits? Nothing. So I took it upon myself to begin to change that and begin to share information from the data and research that there was, which was tiny, and apply it to what we saw anecdotally in clinic and knew to be true, and begin to create a model of working that supported neurodivergent women within the context of their hormones. So that was my journey, really, to how I ended up here quite accidentally.
I'm curious, Adele, along this path of getting diagnosed yourself and training. I love that you trained with Nicole and also with Miranda. Like, that is such a beautiful example of the science and the work together. Yeah. How did you feel supported, if you did, by any therapists or coaches or practitioners you were working with? Did they have an understanding of neurodivergence and ADHD or not? Like, what did you notice?
Yeah, so I find this really interesting because I'm a child of the 80s. No one was looking for neurodiversity in me. I am part of like the lost girl generation where like neurodiversity just didn't exist for women until very recently, really. So I was labeled the anxious child that kind of would manifest as anxiety. And I'm not an anxious person at all, actually, but that was the way it manifests, like overthinking everything quite often, as it does in girls, the internalization of the hyperactivity. And nothing for me really kind of worked in terms of anxiety. I just went along with managing my lifestyle. So I don't really have a history of accessing support specifically around that, but I've been very immersed in the world of practitioners of all different types within the health and wellness industry. And I think up until very, very recently, like all of us, neurodivergence just wasn't considered at all. So through no fault of their own, no, really is the answer. And I think it's improving now with amazing people like you putting this on, sharing the information and getting it out there. But it's a huge topic that we're even beginning to understand ourselves. I often talk about this unraveling that happens once you start to go, oh my gosh, I think this is me. There's this unraveling where you look back and go, that's why that happened. And that's why I was like that. And that's what makes sense. And I don't think that stops. That still happens to me now, looking back. So no would be my short answer, but through no fault of anyone, because it's so misunderstood.
I recently completed a 6-month training with Animus Coaching in neurodivergence and how to work as a coach with neurodivergent clients, which was fantastic because, like you say, the awareness is growing and people are realizing this is really important. We need to talk about this. So it was great and I learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot as I continue to work my way through the different pieces and review things. And there's been mention throughout the training that there is a difference generally between male ADHD traits and female ADHD traits. It's come up a few times that there can be a difference. I'd say generally the idea has been that, in male bodies, it manifests more as like the hyperactivity. And then in female bodies, it can manifest more as like, loss of attention or or going more inwards. It's more of an inward presenting. That's kind of been it though, like there hasn't really been any more discussion from that point as to like, why is this the case? And this is something that I've really learned from you, and I'd love to hear you speak some more to this. How does, being in a female body and having a menstrual cycle influence the different experience of having ADHD between men and women?
Oh my gosh, this could be the whole podcast, right? Just bring me in, Claire, Lauren. If I start like going off, bring me back. But what I would say is it has to go right back to this gender bias that we see in research across the board. It's so stark in ADHD. Everything we know to be true really about ADHD up until probably the last 18 months has been based on naughty little white boy. Right? That's the treatment model, the assessment models, everything is based on this. So we get treated as small men in trying to apply models of therapeutic input. Okay. So that's kind of a massive factor within this. But also for me, this goes right back to the gender norms and expectations as little people that get placed on us. So ADHD, as a girl, there's very clear expectations that may be unspoken around what makes a good girl. Okay. And that is not running around like a hyperactive little child in the classroom, right? No one's going to want to be our friend. We'll get socially alienated. We need to be the good girl. So what happens as a result quite often for ADHD girls is that these traits get internalized. So when we're looking at managing ADHD in boys, we tend to be looking at the external behavior. When we're looking at girls, we're looking at how is she internalized, how she sees herself. And that just makes me feel so emotional, just the thought of it. You know, take yourself back to your 5-year-old self, sat in a classroom, probably with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is huge for ADHD women and nowhere near discussed enough. Terrified of who's going to play with me at lunchtime. What if I don't get very good test results? You know, how do I sit still? It becomes the hyperactivity tends to be internalized in terms of thought, in terms of speech. I mean, I speak way too quickly, you know, that's where the hyperactivity comes in rather than running around, you know? So it's not that the hyperactivity isn't there. It's just that we've masked the hell out of how that presents so that we are socially accepted. Does that help? So it's not this. There's a saying, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. It manifests differently. But overall, I don't believe it's that women are more inattentive. It's just that that's more socially accepted. It's internalized a lot more than with males.
The monkey mind, the constant thinking, the obsessing over the fact that I didn't respond to my friend in 3 days. Maybe our friendship is over, catastrophizing.
What did I do? What did I do? Go back through everything, right? And it's a thought loop. And I think it's important to say here that lots of people say, oh, well, I do that. Like, I do that. I've not, you know, have I got ADHD as well? Well, my kind of analogy for that is everyone needs to wee every day. But if you're doing it 10 times an hour, it's a problem. If it's affecting your quality of life, if you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, hyper focusing on the fact that your friend hasn't texted you back and what did you do and going through it, that's a problem. You know, if you physically cannot reply to emails, if you physically cannot get up and make food for yourself, if you can't do these things, that's affecting your quality of life and it's a problem. No one wants to do the housework. No one's like, yeah, this is great. But when you actually can't do it and you're in a freeze mode of ADHD paralysis, staring at this pile of washing that needs doing and it's tormenting you and you just can't do it because the dopamine is not coming in to help you get up and do it, that's a problem. You know, there's this differentiation that we need to understand more.
Yeah. And I think of my older brother was diagnosed probably 20 years ago now because, you know, those symptoms of not being great at school, not being able to focus, anxiety, all those pieces. Whereas I was very good at school, but because I was a perfectionist, I would still procrastinate and hyper focus the night before to finish. But I was able to fly under the radar. And now it's only in my 30s that I'm in a married relationship and my husband sees me every day and is just like, are you okay? I'm like, I've cried a lot today. Because there's just you're carrying so much. There's so much mental noise and that paralysis. Yeah, I'm feeling very seen in this conversation. It's just a lot, right?
And to touch on that, you know, this marker of being academically able, meaning you can't be ADHD, is utter BS. You know, if we were finding a hyper focus and that was a place we were praised and seen, of course we're going to if we're interested in the topic, you know, we're going to do well because that's, you know, may probably not achieve as well we could have done had that been properly supported, but it's not a marker of whether you've got ADHD or not. I had a crazy IQ, you know, I was in Mensa. I did really well academically. That was absolutely no reflection of my neurodiversity.
Yeah, I think a lot about the spiky profile. I think this is a good way to describe this as well, is that often neurodivergent folk have these, you know, huge strengths. We have special interests or things that we're very, very, very good at and excel in. And then other things that we just struggle with so much more than the average person. So while a neurotypical brain might just be able to get along with most things pretty well, a neurodivergent brain can have this, you know, excellence in some areas and then you know, really struggle in others. And when I learned that helped me because I was also academically really advanced. And my sibling with a diagnosis of ADHD, struggled a lot actually in school. So we actually manifested for us really differently. And what's really interesting is that she was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder a number of years ago because she was having this experience, like over 2 weeks of the month, she was feeling, a certain way, quite elevated, like able to function, being in life. And then the other 2 weeks, just complete like executive function loss and really struggling to maintain relationships, work, like emotional regulation. And so then the diagnosis went to, well, this looks like bipolar disorder, and she began medication for that, and that didn't help. And then since then has actually gone through more processes and realized, it's ADHD. And since beginning medication now for her ADHD, it's unbelievable the transformation in her and how much, more she feels like herself again and can actually function in life. And this is something I find really fascinating. Like, how often are women misdiagnosed because maybe they have ADHD, but again, it manifests differently across the menstrual cycle in the female body compared to the male body. I would love you to explain a little bit more, Adele, why that is, like hormonally. Why can the experience or the symptoms, the traits of ADHD shift, like pre-ovulation, post-ovulation, while we're bleeding?
I could talk about this a day. And I think you're absolutely right. This is one of the reasons women get such a delayed diagnosis, because for a couple of weeks, we're like, oh, boom, I'm on this. My strategies are working, whether they're conscious or unconscious. I'm doing really well. And then we go into like these other 2 weeks where it all goes to hell and we can't cope. We don't think we're functioning. Then our estrogen starts to rise again. We're like, oh, I'm back in the room. It was just a bad week. I was just having a bad time. And we stay in that cycle for decades, potentially. Sometimes I just get it was just a bad week, not realizing this link with our hormones. And the simple answer is that the hormones play an inextricably linked role with neurotransmitters, right? So for those who don't know, ADHD is linked, we think, to an issue with neurotransmitters, most notably dopamine. I think there's so much more to understand about ADHD, but in short, that's it. So how can we not be talking about the impact of hormones when without these hormones, or when they're varying at different times of the cycle, the way the sensitivity of the neurotransmitters is going to be completely different? This is what blew my mind when I was diagnosed. I was like, well, why are we not talking about this? So we look at estrogen, which sensitizes serotonin and dopamine. So when that's higher in the cycle, assuming there's not a big histamine issue there, which is a whole topic in itself, our traits are likely to be a lot easier to manage. Okay, this is very broad, but this is what we see at the moment. Then as that estrogen drops off, there was a study done actually in February this year for the first time that has shown estrogen withdrawal has a big impact on the cycle. So actually after estrogen withdraws our ovulation, we tend to see a flare up of hyperactive traits. And then when we have that second rise of estrogen in the luteal phase, once that withdraws, it's thought we have a rise in inattentive traits. Okay, so it gets quite detailed. We're getting there. They haven't gone into progesterone yet, which again is a topic in itself. But based on the data and the science, estrogen we know is playing that role. Now, then we look at progesterone, which she is such like the unsung hero. And most ADHD women will be like, what? I hate progesterone. We tend to see much more of a perceived sensitivity to progesterone. And I'm not gaslighting any woman when I say that. What I'm saying is progesterone sensitivity is a massive topic that is really misunderstood and something I'm very passionate about. But for a number of women, progesterone can kind of come in if we're enjoying that estrogen high of everything being okay. Progesterone can come in and kind of be like, oh, it's a bit like raining on our parade. So progesterone should be like Valium for the nervous system. But for a lot of neurodivergent women, it can be a really tricky time. And it's been placed on progesterone as the cause. I'm not convinced by that. I think we need research. We don't have any at the moment into it. But progesterone, that second phase of the cycle, can be really tricky. So when we know that progesterone is sensitizing GABA, then actually GABA being like the relaxing neurotransmitter, what role is that playing? So there's so much unknown. But overall, estrogen highs tend to be good for us to be able to manage our traits. And they play a big role for those women who choose a path of medication. Estrogen sensitizes the medication and progesterone dampens it. So they can think they're doing really well on the meds. And then that phase of their cycle, they're in the luteal phase. And suddenly it's like, oh, the meds aren't working now because the medications were all tested on male physiologies. So what they're trying to do is go, oh, well, we'll adapt this and we'll change this. No one really knows what to do about that. They're trying different things. So they're playing a big, big role. You know, we know the journal Psychiatry a couple of years ago showed that neurodivergent women are 10 times more likely to have PMDD, much more likely to have postnatal depression, much more likely to have a very challenging perimenopause. There is this link. So why is it not fundamental to assessment and treatment plans? Like, it's crazy. So there's a huge link, but ultimately it comes down to how the hormones sensitize different neurotransmitters in the brain.
I resonate very deeply with that. And I'm even thinking of my own cycle in the follicular phase. That energy is just like we talked earlier before we hit record about like unmasking. And I feel like in that follicular phase, I'm very unmasked and like all over the place, but like I get so much done. Whereas as soon as that luteal energy comes in, there's a lot more paralysis, a lot more spiraling, a lot more like, should I do that? No, I don't think I will. Should I start that? No, maybe I shouldn't. And it's just, yeah, it's interesting to hear what's actually happening in the brain.
Yeah. And I think it's, important, to understand, well, what are we talking about with hyperactivity? What are we talking about with inattentive traits for any coaches that maybe aren't familiar with that? And when we're talking about inattentive traits, we're talking about the daydreaming, forgetfulness, trouble staying focused, losing things. It's really hard to follow instructions. We're getting easily distracted. We're probably going to be late. We're going to avoid tasks that need our focus. We get completely zoned out of conversations. I mean, how good are we at sitting and nodding and going, we've finished a conversation I had 5 minutes ago and we're thinking about something else, but we're like, yeah, this is important for coaches to know. Motivation's going to be really low. We're going to be much more emotionally sensitive. Our RSD is going to really go through the roof. So this is much more prevalent in that luteal phase, right? But the hyperactive traits, they can really flare up with that around ovulation. So we can see much more restlessness, excessive talking. I mean, if you're ADHD, you've probably found yourself like, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. There's words just falling out of my mouth. I don't know what's happening. That kind of thing. The impulsivity, the positive aggression, really hard to relax and unwind, saying yes to too many things and risk-taking behavior. Really, it's impossible to wait, blurting things out, easily frustrated. These are all the hyperactive traits that can flare up more in the ovulation and follicular phases. So it's really important to understand those differences. And when we're looking at being a coach, supporting our clients with that, bringing awareness to them, like what's coming up for you right now, understanding how the traits show up during the cycle is pivotal to getting a female-friendly model of having an ADHD-friendly lifestyle.
Yeah, let's keep zoning in on this, because this is really key now to be thinking about as a coach working with female clients and potentially with clients who are neurodivergent. What are some of these key considerations from your perspective that coaches need to keep in mind?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that I want to say to this. So again, just like keep me in check. I mean, just the fact that you're listening to this and bringing awareness to it will just feel so just so nice to your client. Like, look, actually, I know you've got ADHD and I want to learn more about this. That's so nice. That's so caring and so invested. But I think it's understanding rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Potentially if we've sent you an email or a message and you've ignored it, just put a little heart on it or like something, because it could be really like, have I said something that I shouldn't, or is she ignoring me? Or, that stuff could come up. Does she like me? All these things are going to be there in a way that's probably much more sensitive to someone that you weren't. And I think depending what you're doing in your coaching, if you bring in sort of specifically the hormone work, remembering that we're much more likely to be dealing with a very sensitive nervous system, probably quite depleted adrenal function. These are going to be really key factors in any plans that you're putting into place. So that's sort of, really looking at the nervous system specifically. As I mentioned, being at much greater risk of some of these hormone-related conditions like PMDD and a severe perimenopause. I think understanding masking, we've touched on this a little bit, but we have become preconditioned to be real pleasy, and we have to undo a lot of that in ourselves. You're likely to have clients who are going to want to please you. They're going to want to sort of go, oh yeah, this all sounds great. And then go off a bit, maybe like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do that, but I didn't know how to say no. I think giving a genuine permission to unmask and sharpen themselves. We were talking before this. Like, we're going to talk over each other, we're going to interrupt each other, and we might get emotional. Someone might be crying 1 minute. All these things. Give your client full permission to do that genuinely without judgment. They might be, whether you're seeing a screen or in person, say if they need to get up and move, go and do it. It doesn't mean they're not listening to you. We're conditioned to think if someone's not sat there silently still, staring at you, they're not listening. That's not true. If they get up and move around, there's no reflection of that. They've just suddenly thought, I need to get the chicken out of the oven, or, whatever it is. It's that genuine permission to not take that as a reflection of how engaged somebody really is with you. I think providing really clear written action points and summaries, not being over wordy, maybe offering to record sessions. So, and allowing to come back. How often have we woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and thought, why didn't I ask that question? It suddenly drops in there. That's just the brain. Our brain will process things and suddenly it comes in, so offering maybe that space. I think if your client is working with other people, acknowledging that we have probably spent a long time advocating for ourselves. I mean, if you've been through the assessment process, I mean, it's so not neurodivergent friendly. We hate forms. Don't give us forms to fill out. To say, can I write to this client or this doctor or this patient or something or other practitioner on your behalf to save you having to reiterate it. So you're not doing that. I think managing expectations, consistency is not our strength, and that is no reflection of how much we want the change. It's just we have to be really, really interested in what we're doing so we can have this massive initial enthusiasm. We're like, clear the cupboards, let's change everything. This is what we're doing. And then we could go 3 days later to this utter overwhelm and paralysis of we're sat in the corner rocking, eating the pizza, go, oh my gosh, what have I done? It's too much. But teaching them to use their cycle, to track their traits, understand this unique rhythm and how their traits are flaring up, and then support them to apply that data to their lives. Don't try and do anything that requires your attention on day 27. And I know this can be kind of quite broad for all women, but it is imperative. The ADHD women almost say, well, if it's available to you, do you have to work on that time? You can probably put in a 12-hour shift. There are other times in your cycle where you will just be on it. You might forget to eat in that time, but you're going to have this amazingness, and that's okay to balance it. We're perfectionists, we want everything to be just right, and to just be patient and compassionate. If we're not doing the things that you expected us to do before you next see you because we probably got distracted or didn't really want to do that bit, or we're going to operate differently.
There's a few things I just really want to jump in here on while they're in my mind that you've mentioned. The flexibility around eye contact, I think, is so important, particularly for any female clients who might also have autistic traits. Yeah. This is something that I have really learned and have had feedback on as well, is that, video doesn't necessarily always suit everybody. And this is something I used to do a lot when I was coaching, maybe 7 years ago, quite a lot of sessions in a day. I would often ask my clients if they were okay with audio, because I just could not do video more than a couple of sessions in a day. But audio, I was totally fine. And this is something I've noticed more coaches offering now too, which is cool, is more audio support between sessions, using Voxer, or even not even having video sessions or even live sessions at all. In fact, just offering audio notes back and forth, which I have to admit, when I first heard this, I was like, but there's a little magic in being together in the moment. But if that works for your client and that's better for them actually to have time to process what they've heard, then to respond in the moment. I also think what you've mentioned, Adele, around the wanting to please, I think that also helps maybe soften that in the moment, because rather than responding right away with, yes, I can do that, absolutely, that's fine, that sounds great. When you have a bit more space actually from hearing the advice or the recommendations or the feedback from your coach, and then you can sit with that and then respond, maybe there's, more opportunity actually to respond, more genuinely. I think that's really interesting. Getting up and moving, being able to move. This is something I've noticed within myself, is literally it's physically painful for me to sit down and just watch something. I can't do it. I have to be walking and listening, or I have to be this morning I did a workout while I was listening to a training I was catching up on. We need to be able to move my body and move around. And as you say, just even simply letting a client know that that's welcome incorporating, some kind of like embodiment practice or movement into your sessions. This is something I always try to do with clients. Breathing, touch, sound, movement. Like, how do we bring our bodies into it? Because coaching can often be so mental and in the mind, it's a lot of talking. Like, maybe, also really bringing the body in, I find can help with a lot of that. Something else that I just want to say before we move on is my therapist who I work with, she specializes in neurodivergence and she's helped me a lot. She offers walking sessions where you can go and have a session together walking in the park, or you could be online together, but you're both out walking while you're having the session. So just being like flexible and creative and open to different ways of, working, I think is, it's exciting and it really inspires me actually, because I also don't like sitting down in front of a Zoom screen all day.
No, it's hard. And I find like when I'm on a screen with clients, I rarely look at the client. I'm kind of, I talk to myself as a television, or I'm like up here, because it's just too, like, my brain is literally like, this is just, I just can't, in that way. And it's very subconscious that we're doing that. And I think there's something really important there to touch on that, Claire, that is the advice we're giving as a coach coming from a very strong neurotypical perspective. So, for example, meditation around women, actually for a neurodivergent, I think, and women generally, if I'm honest, actually, be present with pleasure. Activate your senses, bringing in these somatic practices is going to do far more, particularly for neurodivergent women, than sitting in a corner trying to quiet your mind. It's never going to be quiet. It's not. We literally set you up to fail and to feel like you're doing something wrong, which is what we felt our entire lives. We've always felt different. We've always known there was something different about us and not been able to understand what it was. So I think it's really important to really think, actually, is that something that would work for you, do you think? Rather than saying, right, what we know works in this situation is this, try that. Actually, is that something that feels right to that woman?
And I'm wondering on that, like, failure piece, that people pleasing piece, like, how can we support our clients to, like, I don't even know, like, to peel back those layers? Because I think if I had a coach tell me, like, these are the things that you can do to be successful or to like move past this, I don't know if I would have the capacity in that moment to be like, okay, is this for me or is it not? It would be like, oh, maybe that's what I need to do to fix myself, to fix my brain. I just need to like push forward. I just need to like, there's that feeling of like running against a wall sometimes with ADHD where it's just like, oh, if I could just change this one piece about myself, then everything will be fixed. And so like, how can we make sure we're staying in tune with our clients in the moment? If we're offering suggestions, it's like, you can ask like, how does that feel? But how do we actually follow up or make sure it's actually working for them in the right way?
From the coach perspective or the client perspective? From the coach perspective.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. I think it's building that relationship with the client from the get-go, saying, right, if you're neurotypical, I'm a neurotypical woman. Okay. I'm going to share advice with you that might not land. I want to give you full permission. I don't think that's really for me. And there's going to be things that I might say to you that might work for a number of women that might not work for you. And that's okay. Okay. I think it's giving that permission from the get-go, because there are going to be things that work for women, whether you're neurodivergent or not, that are going to work for some and not others. I think it's creating a really clear, safe expectation around communication and giving permission to go, that doesn't work for me. And if women are coming back to your next session, they haven't done it, being really clear, oh, do you think that maybe your ADHD played a role in that? And we need to find a different way that does work for your kind of brain to be able to do that. Maybe we can explore that together of how to do that. And acknowledging so much of the advice that we get comes from a neurotypical perspective. I think it's just putting it out there. It's not being afraid to just put it out there and say that, I don't think there's this way. It's the relationship. And I think as a client, checking in before you choose a practitioner, how open are they to doing that with you? There are some practitioners who are like, this is how I work. This is my expectation. This is what we're going to do, which I think is much more of a masculine type approach to things, but it does exist. Whereas if you've got a practitioner who's like, and I think this is important, we don't have to be an expert in this. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but actually just saying it out loud, acknowledge it and saying, let's go on this journey together and try and figure it out together. And if something's not working for you, tell me, we'll find another way.
As a training provider, we talk a lot about the collaborative nature of coaching. It's not like me as the coach, I have all of the answers and I'm going to tell you what to do at all. I think that's such a common misconception about what coaching is. It is a partnership, like you say. It's a partnership, it's collaborative. And if we can set those agreements at the very beginning to understand that we're on this journey together where, we can help guide our clients, but we're not the expert. And this is something, there's so many overlaps with menstrual cycle awareness and with also what works in neurodivergence with neurodivergent clients. Like in menstrual cycle awareness, we often say, the client is the expert on their menstrual cycle. They are the ones who know what their menstrual cycle is really like. They're the ones who know what works for them. Sometimes it takes a bit of digging and play and questions to help them like uncover what's already there. But we're not the ones telling them about their experience. We're listening really well, and we're asking great questions, and we're providing support. And it's the same, I see with neurodivergence, of course, because, we don't have to be the expert, like you say. We can listen, we can ask. And I think it's also important to remember that one person with ADHD is one person with ADHD. Everybody's manifestation of traits is going to be different. And the co-occurrence, like you say, is more common than not. So if somebody has ADHD traits, it's also likely that there's other things going on as well. So then how do we approach each client as a unique human being? This is what we talk about with menstrual cycle coaching. We might have an idea of one client has endometriosis. Again, that's one client who has endometriosis. That doesn't mean that what's working for them is going to work for another client. And it's the same, with neurodivergence. We really have to learn the theory, understand these ideas, and then also be quite light with it, I think, too, and really approach each human in front of us as a human being and work together.
And like you say, just because they've got ADHD, that's not everything that we're focusing on. It's a layer of something that is going to have an impact maybe on how they're working, along with the fact that maybe they've got histamine issues, or maybe they've got massive blood sugar regulation issues, which are both issues that we see a lot in the ADHD community. But it is a part of it. It's not the thing that defines that woman, but it is going to play a role probably in how they show up and achieve, I don't like that word, but the intentions that they're setting, how those outcomes are obtained for that woman may just need a different approach.
Mm-hmm. I would love to also hear, we've talked about working with clients, but then on the flip side, being a coach with ADHD. And all of those, once again, ideas around achieving goals or putting systems into place in order to be successful. How can we manage our ADHD as coaches in this modality to avoid that dreaded ADHD burnout that some of us have encountered?
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to acknowledge that burnout boom cycle, that we are much more prone to. We're like, I feel great. I'm on fire. We have so many creative, incredible ideas. Every single idea we have is going to be a business. It's like huge, all this energy. And then suddenly we're like crash and burn, right? And then we retreat and hide. So I think it's important to acknowledge that can be a model of our behavior that you would see in clients. But I think it's applying, like with everything, applying the advice that you would share and the space you would hold with a client to yourself. So I think for me as a practitioner, I manage my diary around my cycle. Okay. Which I know is something you will talk about all the time, but I know that I cannot sometimes even run a clinic when I'm in certain days of my cycle. And this is, certainly more intense the closer I am, deeper I'm going into perimenopause, that there are just days that are just a no for me. And actually, I can't show up in that way. And I'm okay with that. Given that permission, I have to make sure my blood sugar is properly regulated. That is huge for me to be able to do that. And, looking at where in my cycle, that's even more of an issue. Where am I going to be doing clients online? Am I going to be doing, things at home? It's probably not that different to a lot of the models that you're already using and applying, but practicing what you preach in terms of really understanding where your traits show up and looking at, okay, where am I going to hyper focus on this particular piece of work and blocking that out and managing it, So probably no different really to a lot of the general menstrual cycle awareness, but just understanding your unique traits and where they're going to flare up in your cycle and how you can manage it. I think it's just added that layer in about understanding that, particularly if you're an undiagnosed woman and may not know, am I inattentive? Am I hyper? Am I combined type? You know, without that, just exploring that for yourself, what's coming up here for me. So I don't think there's this sort of great big magical answer other than just really tailoring what you're doing already to be very ADHD specific, keeping inflammation low, really loving those adrenals and keeping that blood sugar balanced within your lifestyle.
At the school, we talk about the menstrual ecosystem, like, you know, how can we nourish the menstrual ecosystem? And we keep it pretty simple. Like, we're not diagnostic, nor are we overly prescriptive. And so we talk about things like eating whole foods, eating regularly, getting enough sleep, make sure we're hydrated. We talk about incorporating rest and pleasure, you know, and these, you know, can sound so simple, but the impact is huge, right? And it's the more I learn about neurodivergence, the more I keep hearing the same things: diet, movement, sleep. Like, these have a huge impact on how we feel.
I think it's really important, though, to say there, because it's like you'd listen to that and go, well, that's just so simple. Well, why are we not all doing it then? You know, and actually that is challenging for most women to stick to those things and really respect and honor them as we need to. And when you add in extra layers of complexity a neurodivergent woman has, it's really hard, okay? Because if we just take food, for example, the added things, we know that ADHD women are much more at risk of some kind of eating disorder on a spectrum, whether it's a full diagnosed condition or whether we just have challenges around food. Food can be really boring, okay? If we're not interested in something, we're not going to do it. You know, if we're interested, you will have our full attention for days. If we're not interested, we're not going to do it, okay? So when you're bored, if food is boring, how are you going to hook in to make it the food that maybe you should, I say in inverted commas, be eating? You could be hyper-focused on something for 6 hours and suddenly go, I haven't eaten or drunk anything. Okay. You could go to make lunch and end up completely distracted, hanging, washing out in the garden, naked. You know, like, how have I got here? I don't know how I've got here. You know, so there are all these layers of what should I be eating? What shouldn't I be eating? I'm so overwhelmed now. I've gone into paralysis. I'm just going to eat cheese. You know, these are all the things that, yes, we know we should be eating properly. I'm yet to see an ADHD client who doesn't know what she should be doing, but we can't hook into it. Right. Yeah. So we have to like move away from thinking we need to rustle up spirulina smoothies and kale crisps all day and just come to keep it simple and basic. What is going to quick, what is going to nourish me, what is going to keep that blood sugar regulated that I don't have to think about. We're very good at eating the same thing for like 3 months. They're going, I never want to eat that ever again. If that's the thing you want to eat, eat it. You know, if it's simple, if you want to have hard-boiled eggs and a bit of salmon for breakfast every day for 3 months, do it. You haven't got to go, oh, but I shouldn't be doing this. We want to make it applicable and easy and forget the neurotypical expectation of what that should look like. Okay, that's part of the journey, I think, of this unraveling I speak about, of letting go of what we should be doing. We have to make it work for ourselves. I'm never going to have this spectacular John Lewis show home because I need my supplements out where I can see them. Because if I don't see them, they don't exist. I'm not going to take them.
I can see mine on my kitchen table.
Yeah. Sometimes I still miss them. They could be right in my face and I won't see them because my brain is doing something else.
This is a huge, my ex and I used to argue about this all the time because he would really love like our house to be like, you know, he's very into aesthetics and my supplement, you know, you put them all in a little weekly tab, you know, and it's not very attractive. It's not just quite ugly, but I was like, if I don't have them now, if I don't have them literally on the windowsill in the kitchen, I'm never going to take them. I have spent hundreds of pounds on these supplements. Like if I put them even in the cupboard, like
they don't exist.
They don't exist. It's a waste of money. I may as well flush them down.
Exactly. And, you know, again, with supplements, you know, who's not a supplement whore in the ADHD world? Like we open up a cupboard and there they all are just taunting us like, oh my God, ADHD tax. I've spent way too much money on those. I'm not taking them. You know, we need to take supplements consistently for them to be effective. Not that somebody goes, I need to take those now, you know? So there's all these layers to us that we just need to find a way that is ADHD friendly to manage.
as someone with a history of an eating disorder, I had a pretty severe one in my 20s. And then I also have Hashimoto's. So I have a low functioning thyroid and autoimmune stuff going on. So eating for me is, it is a sensitive issue, and it's something I have to constantly work on, because one of my hyperfocus traits is that I can go an entire day without eating food. And I notice I often don't get hungry when I'm in that state at all. Like, I'm just so focused. And again, this was something my ex and I would often, it was really tough in our relationship. You know, he'd get home from work and I'd be sat hunched over my laptop. I'm still in my pajamas. It's been 6 hours. I've not eaten anything. I've not drunk anything. I haven't gone to the bathroom. I've just been in this hole. And I find this tough. I find it really tough, actually. It's like a constant, particularly at the moment, I'm out of my routine right now, because I'm moving house and I'm staying with friends and family. And so I don't have my like regular go-tos. And so at the moment, I'm just basically living off, like, I've just given myself permission to just eat like sushi from like the supermarket next door every day for lunch. Because I'm like, I need to just eat the same granola in the morning with yogurt. I'm going to eat sushi next door. I know I'm probably not getting as much fiber or as much, nutrients as I could possibly get. But right now, like, I have to always choose the easiest option or I just won't eat.
Yeah.
And then I know, like, the impact on my hypothyroidism, the impact on my ADHD symptoms, like on my health, it's really tough. So I really appreciate you naming that, because you're right. It's like, this is simple. It's also, it can be so difficult.
Because if someone's not ADHD, to explain hyperfocus, it is so intense. Like, my child could be next to me with a broken leg and I'd be like, oh, really now? It's so intense that you're like in it and it's all flowing through you. And there's that fear that if you stop, you're going to forget it all. Right? So it's coming and you're channeling it and it's coming through and it's flowing and you're like on fire, fingers on the keyboard. And there's a bit of you that go, I know I'm losing speed now, but I can't stop, because if I don't get it all down now, it's going to vanish. And we have that fear subconsciously or consciously that we'll wake up tomorrow and it will just be that I can't remember any of it. Like, where was I at with this? What was I going to say? So, and it is so hard to unhook. It's not because we don't want to. And we don't read as well these little signals in our bodies. So we don't realize maybe that we're hungry until we could eat a small child. We're in that raging, ferocious hunger, which a second ago wasn't there at all. And so then what do we want to grab? Something quick and carby, because the brain is like neon light flashing, eat. We're in emergency reserve. So it wants quick carbs, right? So that's what we grab. Then our blood sugar's dysregulated. That's then impacting our adrenals and we're in it. And it's not through choice. If it was this really easy way to just go, well, I just need to make sure I get my protein content, and then we can hyper focus on the grams of protein. How much are we getting? And it's like, it's now become a whole thing, And I love what you said there, Claire. I've given myself permission to just say, this is how it is right now. And if I can do that each day, I'm winning at life. And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
And trying to reprogram your brain of like growing up in that very intense North American diet culture of the early 2000s, 2010s. And yeah, having that permission to be like, because I know there's days sometimes where it's just like, you know what you need to eat, the fiber, you need the protein and all these pieces. And sometimes my brain's just like, maybe it's easier to not eat. Like if I can't do it right, I just won't do it. And so, and that's not the answer or the solution either. But like, there are beautiful seasons of just having hyper-focused meals and they're all like perfect. And I just eat the same thing every day, which drives my husband absolutely bonkers because he doesn't want to eat the same dinner every day. But I'm just like, it's easy for me.
Like himself.
Like, how do you feel about salad again? He's like, please no.
We've got chicken.
He's like, do we need to eat chicken again? I'm like, it's just good. It's just good for us. Let's just eat chicken. But yeah, kind of giving yourself that permission to be like, done is better than perfect. And it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to check every box of everything we ever learned, because as we like to absorb information, it's just like that need to like be perfect and to do it correctly. And the talk about supplements, I'm remembering that I cleaned out a cupboard and found supplements from like, I don't know what I was trying to do with my body.
1996.
I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Okay, good. Oh, good. Or the teas, all the teas that I've bought that will fix me.
Oh, the teas. I've got a tea cupboard as well as a supplement cupboard.
It's just like, why did I buy this?
There's too many steps involved in making it. I'm like, oh, I've got the herbs in the bag. Then I've got to put the herb in a tea bag now. And then I've got to put it.
And then you have to wait until it's the perfect temperature. That's where I lose it, is that I'll like wander off and be like, it's too hot. And then I'll come back like 3 hours later and I'll be like, this is very oversteeped and cold.
Oh my God, the amount of cold cups of tea. Cold cups of tea all through the house.
Brain, isn't it? This is like an insight into like, there's so much into this. We are overthinking. People are like, just pour the tea.
Yeah.
Just drink the tea.
My lovely husband will make me a cup of tea and then I'll have like 2 sips. And then like an hour or 2 later, I'll be like, that was really good. I should have like finished that. I forgot about it.
Yeah. I've really gotten used to cold tea. It's either scalding hot because I can't be bothered to wait for it to cool down, or I've left it for 4 hours and now it's cold. But I'm like, I have to drink it.
Do you know what? This is such a typical ADHD. We've gone off at a tangent. We're talking about tea and complexities of overthinking in a cup of ADHD. This is what happens inside our heads all the time. For anyone who's not ADHD listening, this is what happens all the time about 10 things at the same time.
I recently read this thing about the process delay, because I have that in conversation with my husband. Sometimes he'll say something to me and I'll say, what? And as he's repeating it, I've like absorbed it and can respond, but it drives him absolutely crazy.
And that's important as a coach though, right? No, you might say something and then you start talking about something else and they come back to what they were talking about 5 minutes ago. Because it's then processed and you've gone, oh, actually, I've got a question about that. So just don't be put off by that. Just allow it. Don't go, what are you talking about? Not that you would as a coach, but, kind of come back and go, oh, yeah, that's, and we can go back to it. We can have like 3 or 4 different conversations at the same time.
Something I find helpful on this actually, and I only noticed this because I heard some advice for coaches, which was don't take notes during a session. And if you're the coach that, that you shouldn't take notes because it can appear like you're not listening. And I just could not disagree with that more, because for me, and this is something I'm now upfront with clients about, I let them know that I'm going to be taking notes while we're in a session. And my notes are usually just like a word of what they've said, or just like something that they've mentioned that stands out to me, or that I intuitively feel like, oh yeah, that's it. And then I will be processing it like through writing it down. Like if I'm just sat across from someone, and I've noticed this a lot when I was doing a lot of in-person sessions, because I would be so, again, hyper-focused on the client that I wasn't taking notes. With Zoom, actually, it's easier for me to like be separate in a way so that I can hear them and then I can also be doing my own processing. And just taking the couple of notes here and there also helps me to then, if I've noticed that my attention has gone or I'm somewhere else, or I'm a few steps ahead of the client, which can happen as well. Because I'm like, okay, I hear you talking about this. And now I'm going to all of these different possible solutions we might come to. My brain's already like a few steps ahead. Then coming back to just like a 1 or 2 words that I've written down as I've been going, I find that really helpful for me. And also using the tool of, reflective listening, active listening, and also summarizing. So when I notice that I've kind of gone somewhere else, I'll just pause for a moment, take a breath, and like allow there to be quiet and silence and slowness in sessions as well. And just say, okay, so just like, let's just summarize, what we've covered so far, and to just go back through, or have I heard you correctly? And just go back through what the client has shared and what I'm noticing. And that can just really help to bring me back into the present moment with the person I'm in front of.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way I couldn't take notes during a session. Because I won't remember what we've spoken about at the beginning, and I'm very open. Like, I'm going to be writing notes. I'm going to write your summary. We're going to gather all the actions that I need to send you at the end together during the session. Otherwise, 95% of it's not going to be covered, and it's having just that open and honesty, that some of the benefits of working with me as an ADHD practitioner are this, and some of the challenges, if I forget to send you something, just chase me. Don't be afraid to say, Adele, where is that? And one of the things that I find really hard is my brain, if I'm working with a client online, if I see them in real life, I don't connect them, and I feel mortified at that fact, but my brain just doesn't do that. So I say, like, please don't, if I've already seen like in real life, please don't think that it's like a personal thing that I don't connect to, because my brain just doesn't.
Another question I have around being a coach with ADHD, and I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners who might also have ADHD. How do you know when you're done for the day? Like, what are some of your tips? Because I know my brain is never actually finished with anything. Combine that with owning a small business where there's always things to do. I would love to know if you have any tips or what works for you to be like, and we're shutting the day down. We're stepping away from our workspace.
I'm probably the worst person you could possibly ask that question to, because I would probably literally work 24 hours a day. Okay, because we love it, right? We love what we do. That's why we're doing it. I'm very fortunate that I have 2 children that I have to pick up from school and they have to go to other places. Okay. So really it's much more external things for me that control me doing that. And I still have to try really hard not to go. They're talking to it. I'm like, I just need to get this sent. I just need to get this finished. I have to make sure I have completed something before I get my kids, because if not, I am not with them at all. My brain is very firmly on that thing until it's done. So I won't start something unless I know I can complete it before the end. Again, my husband, you know, he's a very good external control for me, because he will like be, really? You know, in a very loving, supportive way. But he's right, because he knows I'll go into burnout. So I probably am not the person. I wish I had that answer, but I don't, because for me, it's very external things. I have to come in. I've got to get the dinner cooked. One child needs to be here. One child needs to be there.
Well, maybe it is that external source as well. Because as soon as you mentioned your husband, I think of my husband, because he'll come home and I'll be in that headspace of like, oh my gosh, I haven't done anything today. And he'll be like, well, list what you did today. And I'll list like the 3 things that feel so minuscule. And he's like, that's a lot. You're done. You're good. It's just like,
that's really important. Because one of the ways that we can feel like failures as neurodivergent women is the ridiculous expectations that we put on ourselves. I mean, I write lists of myself of what for myself that I'm going to do in the day. And I'm like, oh, I didn't do that final thing. And my husband will be like, babe, that's enough to do in a week. Like, what are you doing? I can't talk anymore. I've lost the capacity to speak because I've done so much. But because I didn't finish that final thing, it feels like I've not achieved it, you know? And that's what a client is going to feel. If there's like this plan or however it is that you work, if that's not all achieved in whatever time frame they've set for themselves to do it, that's going to feel like a failure. You know, that's going to feel like, oh, I haven't done that. I haven't done that bit. And they can come really apologetic, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't do that bit. Like, yeah, but look at all the stuff you did do. We need praise. The antidote to rejection sensitivity disorder is praise, and not being petted on the head like a good little girl. Not in that kind of, not that anyone would do that, but you know, but real genuine. Let's sit and look like your husband's doing with you. Look at what you have achieved. Look at what you have done. You know, we need someone to really do that for us. We're not very good generally at doing that ourselves. Use that ovulation phase to really celebrate that, you know, when that estrogen's higher.
Yeah, that affirmation is so important. And I think a lot about like rejection sensitivity dysphoria and the relationship with the inner critic, which is something we talk about in menstrual cycle awareness, like looking at that luteal phase and just how rough it can be, how self-critical women can be, and then combine that with rejection sensitivity disorder as an ADHD trait. And it's like, really important. You know, if you're meeting with a client who's in that phase of their cycle, or maybe going into that phase of their cycle, maybe they're around ovulation when you meet, then bringing that into the session, like how, you know, can we really celebrate what you know, who you are, and buffer yourself up for the next bit.
And I think to speak to what you were asking earlier around as a coach, what can you do as a coach if you've got ADHD to do that? You know, just say you have a really difficult session with a client during that phase where your RSD gremlins are really out and you're feeling really sensitive and something doesn't go quite well. Like that can send you, RSD is like I describe it like a grenade of a million pins going off inside of me. It's a visceral, like I've done something wrong, you know, that kind of feeling that comes up. Thing that I found really useful, I have something called a thank bank, which is just full of all the amazing emails of gratitude and appreciation and testimonials and feedback. So if ever something like that happens, I'm like, oh, did I not do something that, I forgot. It doesn't even mean that anyone's come to me. It just might be in my head that I'm like, I missed that bit. It's something to come back to remind yourself you do know what you're doing. You're really good at what you do. You don't need to like take down your Instagram or website and go run away and hide in a cave forever. It's just that having these tools there ready for if that happens.
I have a
Adele,
stack of Post-its. I have a stack of Post-its because I do that too. Or I'll hang up with someone and I'll be like, that was the best thing ever. And then like an hour later, I'm like, oh my God, I actually think they hate me. And so I'm like, no, I wrote down all the nice things people have said about me.
Brilliant. Love that.
Sorry, Claire.
No. It's good. It's good. I'm curious, how do you see, Adele, menstrual cycle coaches collaborating with clinical practitioners like yourself and with a client? And also when, like, what kinds of things, should a coach be mindful of when it comes to referring a client on to somebody else with neurodivergence, in your opinion?
So absolutely, I believe in a feminine model of leadership. Okay. None of us have all the answers. And I believe that our role as practitioners is to create a circle of support around a woman. So we almost become like her toolbox of resources to dip in and out of. So I quite often collaborate with ADHD coaches, or other health practitioners, psychiatrists, nutritionists, and they're very much that person's client. Because I know sometimes there can be this fear of scarcity, like, oh, if I refer them to there, am I going to lose that client? There can be that concern, which I think we need to speak to. But actually that client is going to love working with you more because they've trusted that actually I've identified this need. And I think it'd be great if you had this session. So I quite often do one-off sessions with women. Plus sometimes the practitioner comes as well. And it's about explaining this is what's happening. From a hormone perspective and neurodiversity perspective, this is what is happening. And then either that client alone or with the practitioner takes that information and experience and feeds it into the work they're doing. So you don't have to be this expert on it. Like we were saying earlier on, I coach a lot of women through becoming women's health practitioners. I work with Nicole now and I'm on her team and I'm involved in that quite heavily. And this consistent pattern is that women feel like they have to keep doing courses. They have to keep training in X, Y, and Z. Otherwise I can't do this job. It's like, no, this is that imposter syndrome. Come back to what you're really passionate about and be great at that. And then just say, actually, I can see this here. I think it'd be great to have a one-off session with this practitioner. Get the information. I'd be happy to do it with you if you are. Let's get this information. How can that inform how we're working together? So I actually think it's a great way to, like I say, operate in these feminine models of leadership and provide a really good service to your clients. So I've forgotten the second part of your question, but I think, does that answer the first part for you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like this idea of the feminine model and it being more collaborative, more holistic, and doesn't have to, we don't have to be, like we said earlier, the expert, dismantling that idea and providing a truly collaborative approach in service of the person who sat in front of us. We speak at Cycle Coach School about, things to look for with referring, mostly around referring to like mental health therapists, because often things can come up in coaching that are beyond the parameters of really that modality. So if from your perspective and in your clinical practice, what kinds of things could a coach maybe come across in a client? Maybe some things that might come up in a session that you would say that could be a flag that you need to call in support elsewhere.
Do you mean for ADHD specific support? Yeah. So, I would say, I don't think there's a specific checklist. I don't think when there's a mental health issues, we kind of go, oh, I know, I can see that quite clearly. But because I would say any woman, for me, I don't need a woman to be diagnosed to come and work with me. The fact that you've gone yourself, we don't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I think this is what's happened. We've been down all the rabbit holes, okay? And everything is screaming, yes, I think this is me. That is enough for me to work with a woman who thinks she's ADHD, and I will treat her like she has that. So I think it's about saying, okay, if you've recognized this in yourself, really validating that in her experience in knowledge and not going, oh, everyone's got that these days, or, whatever. It's not, again, I don't think any coaches in your community would do that, but just validating it and saying, perhaps you might want to speak to these people to see if there's any support that could be given. Is it an ADHD coach who can give you some real strategies around these things that are more challenging? Is time management and time blindness a real issue for you? Perhaps go and speak to an ADHD coach around that. Are your hormones playing a massive role on your traits? I'm really happy to support people with that. But I think it's with anything, it's when we have that feminine intuition in our body that we go, this isn't my remit. This is outside my scope of expertise. This is outside my scope of practice. And if we find ourselves kind of trying to go, oh, I'm going to try and answer this, and, which we've all done at times, to pretend that I know enough to be able to do this, it's going to feel really uncomfortable in your body. On some level, that's going to come across. It's going to feel like a massive sense of responsibility. You don't need to. So if someone comes to me with a massive candida issue in their gut, that's not what I do. I know enough about it that I could probably fumble my way through it to deal with it. But it's not my area of expertise, and I'm going to just get anxious about thinking, like, have I covered this point? I don't need that sense of stress in my life. Actually go and work with this amazing gut practitioner who's going to be able to support that for you. And then let's focus on what we're doing here. So I think it's when you just start to get that uneasy feeling, really connecting with your own body as a practitioner. Where does this feel like, right? I feel like I have the expertise here. You might be able to provide resources to them, like this podcast, or I've got free resources on my website that women can download and use. You can download those as a coach and give them to your client and say, look, here's some information. Does this feel sufficient for you? If not, perhaps go here. I think it's just really giving yourself permission to not be all things to all people. Which we take on so much as practitioners. We don't need to.
There's been a recurring theme in this podcast this season, hasn't it, Lauren?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this idea, I think, that once we step into this world, that we need to be the expert on hormones. We need to be the expert on the rites of passage work. We need to be the expert on the shamanic dimensions of menstrual cycle awareness, and also, on the neurodivergent piece. We need to be the expert on like menstruation and all of the different issues that can come up around that. And then a lot of fear and imposter syndrome that can arise if we're presenting, if a client comes to us and they have, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, for example, and we don't know everything about that, then how on earth could we possibly ever support them? And really dismantling that idea is something that, we have spoken about quite a lot. And I think it's so important sometimes to also just say, like, I don't know.
Yeah. But I know someone who does.
Or I can find out for you. Or what do you know about this? Because the client often knows so much more.
And as a coach, create your team. I know who my naturopath is. I know who my nutrition is. I know who my gynae physio is, that I am sending them to because they're amazing practitioners. And I trust that practitioner because I've experienced them myself, that they're going to give a really good service to my client.
Totally.
Don't dilute your own medicine.
Yeah.
And also just trusting, especially if you are neurodivergent, like my ADHD brain, I need to trust what lights it up, because as you're coming into this MCA world, there are so many like areas that you can go, and like people will come to you and suggest things or give you ideas especially when you're new, of like, well, maybe you should work with young girls. Maybe you should work with perimenopausal women because they're older and have more money, and like all these like conversations. And so then my brain's like, well, maybe I should do everything, or maybe I should do that. And there's like that like light bulb, that chasing shiny object kind of syndrome, versus like when I sit by myself and I'm like, what makes me like so excited? And it's like none of those things, and being able to like own that and trust that. And like you said, build your team of people who are equally excited and equally lit up, but by the things that you are not, and like being okay with that differentiation or that like boundary around yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got two more questions before we begin to finish. One is a personal curiosity, and one's a very practical one. Which one would you like to start with?
Oh, either. Hit me.
Okay, the personal curiosity is, do you think that the women who are really drawn to menstrual cycle awareness, the ones who it really makes a lot of sense, that light bulb moment you described earlier, Adele, you're like, oh my God, this explains everything, who go down the rabbit hole, who really like live their lives by it, and then also who become facilitators and practitioners of this work. Something that I'm beginning to notice is that a lot of these people, these women, also appear to have neurodivergent traits. And I'm really curious if there's something about the neurodivergent female who is drawn to menstrual cycle awareness, or who maybe also finds a lot of support in the practices, and it becomes more meaningful or important for them than perhaps a neurotypical female brain who maybe doesn't need that infrastructure quite so much. And this is a theory I have, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it.
It's not something I've ever considered, because obviously I'm not in the same space as you are in terms of change, but that doesn't surprise me at all. I think we are constant solution seekers. I've never seen an ADHD woman who's gone, oh, I'll accept no as an answer and just defeat. Like, no, we will always find a solution and a way. And I think something with menstrual cycle awareness, it's like, oh, that all makes sense. If something makes sense to us, we're in. Okay. And this is why with the work that I do, my first session with women is very much an educational, in an exciting way, not a boring way, of saying this is the why of what's going on. Because when we understand the why of what's happening, we're in, right? Like, okay, that makes sense. I can do it. If you just tell me what to do without any concept, I'll do it for about a day if you're lucky, and it's not going to happen. So with the model of menstrual cycle awareness, suddenly there's this structure, if you like, to understand this ebb and flow that you've experienced your entire life that no one's explained to you. And it allows us to be fully in the truth of who we are and not be expected to show up the same every single day. Okay. So I don't know the answer, but based on what you've said, that would be my initial thoughts on it. That doesn't surprise me because it allows for change as well. We don't like doing the same thing all the time. It's boring. Okay. It allows for change.
Yeah, I love that. Allows for change. I think that's what ultimately drew me to menstrual cycle awareness to begin with, was this permission to be different frequencies each week, to explore and express different parts of myself, and to really be authentic and to really feel like I belong, in this body. So there's a lot of overlap.
Also, something that just came in there, a lot of people who are neurotypical maybe don't feel as comfortable to get on social media and start talking about periods.
Weird.
Right? I mean, I see a lot of neurodiverse women who are doing stuff on social media that maybe isn't the normal thing to do. Most people in my child's playground at school are not talking about periods and vaginas on Instagram, because it's like, but because of the passion that we feel about it, we don't care. Like, this is a truth. This is my, my purpose, my medicine. This needs to be, people need to know this, that's where we come from with it. So equally, we're very happy to have the conversations about it. Maybe that plays a role there.
Yeah, I like that. I hadn't considered that before, but that makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to sit with this some more. I think there's something interesting here. And also around perimenopause, and as women become, perimenopause gets more and more awareness, and this is also a time where late diagnoses can occur more as well. Like, I think there's a really interesting relationship there too. My other practical question is for coaches listening to this who may have some neurodivergent clients in their practice, or maybe in the future will. How can they support their client to begin to track these neurodivergent traits across their cycle, bringing it into their charting?
So I think this comes back to, if we can't see something, it doesn't exist. So online apps probably aren't that helpful to the vast majority of ADHD women. Some women will love it, but the vast majority, it's not going to be that helpful. We're just going to forget to do it. So the model that I use that seems to be effective for the majority of women in my community is paper and pen, creating a tool that allows those traits that they get to create themselves with the traits, and then a simple X in a box. End of the day, have that printed out by the side of your bed with a pen that does not get used for anything else. Because if you get into bed and that pen's not there, you are not going to get up to get the pen. Okay. It's too many steps. It's like, no, I'm in bed now. I can't possibly get back out, because then that's rewinding what I've already done. So the pen is there, and you will tell yourself, I'll remember to write it in the morning.
I was just going to say.
You're not going to remember anything out that day. Okay. So having that pen printed out, paper, and a real visual, it's a cross. It's a cross. Letting them have permission to do 80-20. You don't need to do this perfectionist. Doesn't need to be 100%. Have this there. That model seems to be the most effective for ADHD women, as opposed to anything online.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. I always encourage pen to paper.
I have to have pen and paper.
Yeah.
If it's on an app, I love the app. I get really excited for about 3 days and then nothing happens. And I can't see the visual of the pattern. I need to see like 3 months where, like, for me, day 21 is my psycho day. Like that was only through visually seeing that on patterns that I'm like,
Totally. Yeah. Looking for patterns, I find flicking back through a journal is a lot more enjoyable, and it's also the slowness of that experience too, which helps my brain to actually see what's there. I like using the app to just see when my period is coming. I put in every time I'm bleeding. That's great. That's helpful.
The practicality is one
fine.
But for looking for patterns for traits, you're not going to get that on an app.
No, I'm still yet to see one that I think can do it.
They can't.
No, apps are good for like the practical. Yeah, they're good for the practical piece, but I know for me, like using paper charts, even just like your vocabulary and the way you like describe a certain thing. Like I like looked back and it's like the same day I used the exact same wording, and it's just like, like an app could never capture that. I'm just like, okay, clearly I'm going through something on that day. Yeah, it's amazing.
So as we come to the end of our conversation, I'm curious if either of you have anything that you feel like needs to be said or named before we begin to finish.
No, just thank you for having me. Really enjoyed this. I hope that it helps women who maybe have been sat with some of these things to maybe feel validated and seen in their experience, and to know that maybe lots of the things they may have been gaslit with in the past, that actually there's truth to it. And to validate their experience, if they can take something from this for that, and they enjoy our conversation about tea. Wonderful.
If you're staring at a cup of cold tea, maybe there's something to explore.
Or if you have a cupboard of tea that you've never made, but it's going to fix you.
It's the cupboard of tea.
Oh my goodness. Adele, this has just been awesome. I mean, I feel like for everything we've touched on, we could go a million threads more. And I imagine for those listening, they're going to feel the same. So where can people engage with you more? Where can people find you and hear you share more on this?
So I like to hang out on Instagram. That's probably the place where you're very welcome to pop me a message. My website, harmonizeyou.co.uk, has got lots of resources on it. There's letters that for women going through perimenopause, they can send to their GP around HRT if that's what they choose. There's lots of, there's a handout for ADHD and hormones. There's a booklet. There's lots of things on there that will hopefully be able to support you. And you're very welcome to message me. I love getting messages from people. So just reach out to me if I can help.
Beautiful. And we'll add all of that in the show notes so it's easy to find. Thanks for listening, everybody. Yeah. This has been such an awesome season. We're coming to the end of it now. And if you listen to this and you have found it really helpful, or if you know someone in your life who may have ADHD traits or is working with clients who may be neurodivergent, please share it with them. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Cycle Coach Show. If you loved what you heard, then please review, share, and subscribe to help us reach more cyclical listeners like you. You can find us on Instagram at Cycle Coach School or online at cyclecoachtraining.com.